The word superstar is often used to describe the best athletes in any given sport. The metaphor indicating that their talents outshine everyone around them. Usually that label goes along with fame, but every once in a while there's an all-time great who flies under the radar. In this case, because of their quiet, polite demeanor. This is what you don't know about hockey legend Ron Francis. Welcome to What You Don't Know About Sports, where we delve into the forgotten stories, teams, and athletes of sports history and question widely held takes on today's sports. I'm Matt, and this is Blake.
Howdy.
And today we got a story about a man who gets left out a lot of times in the pantheon of all-time hockey talents, and that is Ronnie Franchise, Ron Francis. Blake, who is your favorite hockey player of all time?
Considering I very recently started following hockey somewhat closely, not just minimally, but somewhat closely. I've heard a lot of, I know a lot of players and stuff, but I don't have a favorite team. I'm kind of a bandwagon Bruins fan if you ask my wife, and a Canes fan if you ask Matt or anybody else. But if I had to choose a single player to save my marriage, it would be Zdeno Chara. Mostly because my wife has his jersey and so does my kid. Neither of which were my choice. They were hers. But that's her favorite player. Hashtag Bruins. Don't kill me. But anyway, so that if I had to pick one, that would probably be it. But as far as Ron Francis goes, he is very much under the radar there. I didn't realize until pretty recently, like since within the last year or two, it might have been for a different episode of this, but I looked at the all-time points leaders in hockey, and his name was at the top, and I was like, wait, doesn't he work for the Hurricane? At the time, he was either the general manager or he had just gone to Seattle. But I was like, wait a minute, he played for how long? He did what? It's just not something. It's just not a name that gets thrown out anytime we're talking about all-time hockey greats.
Which isn't often. We don't get to do that hockey very often on the podcast. So I'm glad we are having an episode here for that. But you're right. He is just really under the radar. Like I'm not sure who the unanimous pick for like third or fourth or fifth greatest NBA player of all time would be, but it's sort of like, hey, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, did you guys forget he was that awesome? Who knew? Like it doesn't, or Willie Mays is third on the home run list. I forgot that Willie Mays was an all-time great, but Ron Francis, and part of it's because it's hockey, right? Everybody knows that Wayne Gretzky is the GOAT in hockey, and then there are like isolated pockets that people know, and it's primarily because of how famous players would have gotten, like an Alexander Ovechkin or a Sidney Crosby. And Ron Francis was never that guy, which is why we're doing an episode of What You Don't Know About Sports about him. So one of my favorites retroactively, my favorites are all kind of in the new school because I didn't really do hockey before I started following the Hurricanes. So I'm going to go with Sebastian Aho, which is a good name.
It's very homerish.
Hey.
Very homerish because he is a current player at everything.
Young fans must young fan.
And he's like 23.
Yeah. I remember as a kid watching SportsCenter and being like, wow, Steve Yzerman's really cool. Yzerman, what a fun name. But I didn't follow it intently enough to have a favorite. Brett Hull had a hockey game back in the 90s that you could play on computer. That was my introduction to hockey. It wasn't NHL 93 or 94 like most people. I had Brett Hull hockey. So
Brett Hull, like Tiger Woods PGA golf.
it was,
Yeah,
yeah,
so
and it had an NHL license somehow, and it was shift was shoot. I knew that. I remember that.
that's all you really needed. But we, to be fair, to all the other teams, though, I mean, so this is a two-way street. This is a tad bit homerish because of who Francis was drafted by and ended up playing for again, and who he ended up working for after he retired as a player. So this is a tad bit homerish, but if you've listened to any of our other episodes, this is our jam. Finding these people. If this is your first episode, welcome. If it's not, you know that we look for the Ron Francis franchise.
No,
The
that's
Ron
not right.
Franchises. Anyway, we look for those players who are lesser known, like Ed De La Hanty is one of the most recent ones we did. One of the all time great hitters in Major League Baseball history. Go download that if you don't know. But yeah, this is right down our alley if you're not aware. So let's do it.
And if you are a hockey person and you're already aware that Ron Francis is one of the GOATs, like, just pump the brakes there. Don't yell at us. We know if this is in general sports parlance, people kind of forget about him.
We can't be experts at everything. Okay, all you backseat podcasters know everything. We know.
I can be an expert in everything. Anyway. Let's get into it. Ron Francis was born on March 1st, 1963, in one of my favorite named Canadian towns, Sault Ste. Marie, in Ontario, Canada. If you've ever seen that name spelled, it does not look like Sioux at all. It looks like salt or salt, but it's Sioux. Sioux it is. His father worked at a steel mill for 40 years. And is credited by Francis with teaching him hard work from an early age. Obviously, your father works in a steel mill. You are going to learn something about hard work. He played junior hockey for the Sault Ste. Marie North Stars in what was called midget hockey at the time, and then for the Greyhounds in the OHL before being drafted 4th overall in the 1981 NHL entry draft by the Hartford Whalers. This is a time where we're going to tell you just a little bit about the whole junior hockey system, because it is not the same as most American sports. And again, we're talking about Canada, but the NHL, America, Canada together. It's not the same as the other big three leagues here. It's not the same either as the way soccer does stuff. It's kind of a hybrid in between the two. So just an overall here, anybody aged 16 to 20 in Canada, and also did not realize this, the United States, can play junior hockey in one of the three leagues up in Canada: the OHL, the Ontario Hockey League, the Western Hockey League, or the too many letter abbreviated Quebec Major Junior Hockey League. That's a holdover from a crisis between leagues a while ago. But yeah, the QMJHL. What league you play in depends on where you're from. The Canadian provinces, as well as the individual states in America, are divided up among the three leagues. When you become 16 and you want to play in one of these leagues, they do a entry draft of their own, just like you would see in professional sports where they draft these players. So you may be from Sault Ste. Marie and end up playing in a different area of Canada. You may be from, I guess technically you could be from North Carolina and end up playing in Ontario or Quebec, whichever place we are assigned to. Once you're there, you are technically, by the NCAA, considered a professional. You are allowed to make some money. They give scholarships. If you're from Canada and you want to go to Canadian college, you can play junior hockey, and they will pay for your schooling separate from that. It just seems partly because it's different, but partly because it takes away some of the issues we have with amateur sports. Seems like it could be a better system. And once you are a junior hockey player, you are also eligible for the NHL draft when you turn 18 years old. The way that works is once you're 18 years old, and this is for American and foreign-born players as well, So even NCAA players, once they turn 18, they can be drafted by NHL teams and then can return to wherever they were. So if you are an NCAA hockey player, like for instance, Adam Fox of the New York Rangers was once selected by the Carolina Hurricanes after his freshman season. He returned to, I believe, Harvard and played the rest of his college career. You can go back to school. You can go back to your junior league, which is what Ron Francis did. He played 1 year as a junior, got drafted, and then returned for part of a season before being called up. The only rules are that you have to be 18 by the middle of September to be drafted, and you can't be 20 years old before your draft year runs out. So as we're recording this in 2022, if you're not 20 before the end of this year, you can be drafted this year. If you're older than that, you're just a free agent. Anybody can sign you for any amount of money. You also have the ability to just not sign with the team that drafts you and you become a free agent as well, which is also what Adam Fox, who I mentioned earlier, did. He just declined to ever sign with the Hurricanes, and after 3 years, he was a free agent to sign with whoever he wanted to. So bringing it back to does that kind of make sense actually first, the way that works? You're a junior, you get
very
drafted.
confusing, and it's because us dumb Americans only know the college NCAA system, because we let the NCAA run everything about our lives, and then the NCAA lets the media companies have all the rights to all the games and decide when and where everyone gets to play. And so it's like this stupidly convoluted system that if we just set the NCAA on fire, everything would be better.
Which is always the weird thing, because the NCAA is just the schools that decide the rules too, right? So it's, I don't know. It's this weird.
I don't know. Yeah, it's weird.
We would not design it from scratch this way.
No, this is decades of mistakes all piled on top of each other.
Yeah, but I don't know that they would do it the same in Canada either. Although it is very NCAA like. If you go look at the games and the attendance figures and how rowdy the people get for supporting their town's junior hockey team, because it is just like NCAA sports. It's your town's or your local municipality's team, right? That's who you have to gravitate towards.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Anyway, Ron Francis was drafted by the Hartford Whalers, went back to Sault Ste. Marie to continue playing junior hockey. He played 25 games for the Greyhounds in his second junior season, and he made a big impact. He averaged over 2 points a game, which for our non-hockey regulars, a goal or an assist counts as a point. And so he had 2 points a game before joining the Whalers for 59 games in the NHL in his rookie season. So a mid-season call-up. With the Whalers, in his first full season, he immediately put up 23 goals and 45 assists for 69 total points, giving him his first of 22 consecutive seasons with 50 or more points. That 22 consecutive seasons is an NHL record, tying the great Gordie Howe. It would be only until his last season that this streak was broken. So he had a chance to break it, couldn't quite do it. He immediately was looked at as a cornerstone of the franchise. He was a fan favorite in Hartford, and he immediately made 3 all-star teams while he was playing in Hartford. In just his 4th NHL season, at the age of 22, he was named team captain. Which
that's pretty rare. Well, I'm not as familiar with hockey, but that seems somewhat rare. I feel like in the NFL, American football, they just make the starting quarterback a captain no matter what, just because it's almost like they want to force them to be in charge. Like they want to force them into a leadership role, whether they are capable of doing that or not. So I'm actually not, I mean, that sounds very impressive, but I'm not actually sure off the top of my head what ages all the other captains of other teams are. I'm assuming that they're older.
It is definitely a thing you earn. It's not always given to the best player. Your best player usually might be an alternate captain for sure. But it is a veteran honor. So to be 22 and to have, because the captain is the person who speaks for the locker room. They are the player, not coach, but the head player just the way it should be. A captain is the captain in the NHL. And so to be that at 22, that's a big deal. Also, it helped that Hartford was not very good. And so 22-year-old captain was in the realm of possibility in the first place.
He immediately became the best player on the team when he was drafted, is what you're saying?
Yes. To illustrate that, while he became the franchise leader in almost every offensive category during his time in Hartford, the team did not succeed quite as much. During his career in Hartford, which would last 9 seasons, the team only had 3 winning seasons during that time. They did make 5 straight playoff appearances, but caveat: 8 teams per conference made the playoffs, and there were far fewer than the number of teams we have now, with counting teams in the 20s total. So more than half the teams in the league made the playoffs in those days. So they did.
Everyone gets a trophy.
It was a lot like that. They did make 5 straight playoff appearances, but of those, the last 4 ended in first round exits. And the first one of those 4 was after winning the division for the first time in team history. So they were the best team in the division in regular season and then lost in the first round of the playoffs. And that kicked off a string of 4 straight first round exits. So it wasn't the greatest thing, and it's part of the reason why he was the captain. It's also part of the reason why he became the franchise leader and everything. It was also a relatively young franchise when he joined it in the first place. So he kind of right time, right place, right time thing for that in particular.
And then winning the division doesn't get you a whole lot, right? Like, I mean, if you win your division, it is something to be proud of because you're the best team somewhat regionally. Kind of regionally. They should really redo divisions in all pro sports pretty regularly because like why some teams play other teams I'll never understand. But well, I mean it's something to hang your hat on winning the division, but and it might be something you put in your rafters, but it doesn't give you a whole lot else. Like so it is impressive that he took them there. That I feel like that's the most impressive thing you take from this is the fact that he took them there at such a young age and being the captain at such a young age. That's impressive. The team, no wonder they moved.
Yeah,
we'll get there.
It didn't help. Not to chase rabbits, but I'm an advocate of pretty much doing away with divisions in almost all sports. The NFL makes a big deal out of division champions. There's no reason that the NBA still has divisions. Just play everybody twice, home and away, and cut some games out, make it more exciting. That would be better. Anyway, Francis ends up not being a career Whaler, despite being one of the best players in the league, one of the best, definitely the best player on the team, and being a fan favorite. He ends up getting traded, and he ends up getting traded for the same reason that many franchise icons get traded, and it's because of a contract dispute. In the 1990-1991 season, Francis came in to the last year of his contract. It was an option year at the end of his contract. He kind of wanted a new one. He wanted to be able to renegotiate after the season, but negotiations had gotten tense. Ron Francis and the Whalers general manager are both in all sorts of sports media. If you search their names, they come up as 2 of the nicest guys you will ever meet. So I'm imagining tense negotiations between the 2 of them being a slight raising of voices, or perhaps simply not shaking hands on the way out the room. I can't imagine what tense negotiations from 2 notorious nice people would look like, but apparently they were. And the team was accused by Ron Francis of demeaning him throughout the year. This is a direct quote from him in the Hartford newspaper, where he indicated that the team was dragging him in the press throughout the season. There were constant stories suddenly about what Ron Francis couldn't do, and all these stories well founded about how the team kept struggling in the playoffs, struggling in regular seasons, that Francis couldn't lead them out. He looked at that as the team doing that in order to get a better deal, like a negotiating through the media, trying to keep his number down. But Francis also started having issues with coach Rick Lee. Lee is not one of the greatest coaches in NHL history by any stretch of the imagination. And he took the captaincy away from Francis during the season amidst the negotiation issues, and some of the team was not having the best season best start that they could have had. So he took the captaincy away from Francis. Francis didn't complain openly, kept showing up, kept working, but that was another spot where he thought that the team was demeaning him. Francis said after the trade, again, this is a direct quote, "It's funny I went from being the best thing since sliced bread last season to on the outs over the summer." So he felt like as soon as the negotiation window popped open, he started being the worst player on the team suddenly, when before he wasn't. The team did reach out again 2 weeks before that year's trade deadline to indicate that they were willing to re-sign him, willing to reopen talks, and to indicate that they were not going to trade him. This is mostly coming from general manager Eddie Johnston, noted good guy, who wanted to keep Ron Francis, because why wouldn't you? But the owner of the team at the time, Richard Gordon, supposedly said, and this is coming from Eddie Johnston, "They told me to get Francis off the team. Either Ronnie was gone or me and my staff were gone." So kind of an ultimatum from the owner. We're getting rid of Ron Francis, or I'm getting rid of you. You pick. And in that situation, you take care of yourself, right? So Gordon, so Johnston started looking around at the trade deadline for whatever he could get. He had a reputation before and coincidentally after, when he would rejoin Ron Francis in Pittsburgh, of being a good general manager, of making good trades, of always winning trades. This would not be one of them, even though the owner, Richard Gordon, called the trade a good trade at the time in the newspaper, indicated that it was solid. This ends up being one of the worst trades, not in the history of the NHL. This ends up being one of the worst trades in the history of sports, period. Like, forget money to bail out a failing play for Babe Ruth. This one takes the cake in many respects. The Whalers got an offensive forward in John Cullen, who was pretty good. They needed a little bit more offense. Even though they had Francis, they needed some more guys that could score. They thought they would do this by getting John Cullen. They also got an offensive defenseman in Zarli Zalapski. That was also something they needed. They had big guys that could stop the puck, but they needed a guy that could move it, play on the power play, anchor that kind of thing. They needed somebody like that. So everybody thought this trade was a win-win, because the Penguins got a huge defenseman with the reputation of beating the crap out of everybody in Ulf Samuelsson. One fun Ulf Samuelsson quote is, he said that, quote, "My mother thinks I'm a dirty player," unquote. So that tells you what kind of dude he is.
It's really bad.
When your old mom's like, "Yeah, nah, dude, you're dirty. Like, I can't defend you, boss." That's when you know things aren't going well.
That's really bad.
Yeah. They also get a reliable, in Ron Francis, a reliable face-off winner, one of the best two-way players, offense and defense, in the league, in Ron Francis. He's better all around than the guy he's replacing in Cullen, and they could put him on a second line behind another all-time great, Mario Lemieux. The Penguins coach reminded Ron Francis when he arrived in Pittsburgh that Lemieux was the first line center, and Francis was quoted as saying, "I don't care, let's win." There's the attitude that Francis had towards playing. Doesn't care about the accolades, doesn't care about his placement. Let's go win some games, right? And when they did, Within 2 weeks of the trade, the Pittsburgh Penguins climbed from 4th in the division to 1st in the division and won not only that year's Stanley Cup, but the following year's Stanley Cup as well. They go back to back on the heels and powered by this Ron Francis trade. In the second cup win, Mario Lemieux broke his hand and Ron Francis was elevated to the first line, and he scored the cup winning goal for the Penguins in that year's Stanley Cup Finals. So he goes from a team that can't get much done, gets traded because they don't want to keep him, they don't want to pay him, they kind of are dragging their heels. He leaves a place he wants to be. He goes to Pittsburgh and he immediately starts winning. Sounds like an improvement.
Very much an improvement for him, and very much an improvement for Pittsburgh. And obviously the Whalers, in hindsight, made a terrible decision. But you know, in pro sports and egos and contracts and everything's about money with salary caps and all that stuff. And so it sucks that ultimately pro sports is a business, but sometimes owners and general managers tend to forget that like they're playing with other people, like they're playing with other humans' lives. And it actually is probably more rare that they are more courteous to the person than they are the player. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Like they normally treat, I mean, they treat everybody as disposable for the most part. And so it really sucks when you hear about this stuff. It's like he just became your franchise's all-time leader in every statistical category. He's been a captain for years now, and you're just gonna ship him off to Pittsburgh. Like, that doesn't sound right. It ultimately worked out, but the business of pro sports can just be gross. It's like that. That's how I think of it sometimes. It's just like slimy business, money, contract, gross.
And worth noting is that it didn't work out for Hartford at all. Like, they're not going to make the playoffs after this. They make it the season of the trade happened, but they're not going to make it again after this trade. It was not a good trade for them. So really, it's not like, nothing indicates that it was some deal where they couldn't sign him. It just became like an ego thing. So like, why?
Yeah. When you start to get these type A personalities, like to be an athlete at that high level, Ron Francis is an anomaly. To be the quieter, more shy, like just put me on the fourth line, I don't care, let's just win kind of thing. Like, you don't see that in pro sports. Usually the pro sports are like that the very strong-willed type A personalities and stuff. And so sports are full of them, not just the teams, but the people who ultimately become general managers and presidents and even owners sometimes were former players, and they have that same mentality. So it just runs rampant in pro sports.
And I think owners sometimes forget that there was a time in sports history where they had to pay attention more to the bottom line than to anything else, because teams were folding left and right at one point in sports history. This was towards the end of that time, and it was a time when franchise values were rising. Even at that point, they were starting to go up. And so the value of owning a team was being able to sell the team later. So that you were going to make more on your sale than you ever were from the actual team year to year. And so sometimes owners lose sight that in addition to needing to make money, they're also a caretaker of a thing that people care about, and they make poor decisions, not singling out a particular owner in the Washington metropolitan area, but very similar in the way these two people handle business. Anyway, individual honors would finally follow Ron Francis during his time in Pittsburgh. In 1994-1995, he won both the Lady Byng and the Selke Awards, one of only a few players in NHL history to do that. If you're unaware, the NHL awards all have fancy names, which is cool as long as you're aware of the fancy names of what they're for. So the Lady Byng is a sportsmanship award given to the player who demonstrates good sportsmanship throughout the year. Usually you're a talented player. It's not just the person who stays out of everybody's way. You play well. You just don't play dirty at all. So you won that one. The Selke is given to the best overall center, not necessarily the one that scores the most, but the best two-way player at the center position gets the Selke. So who's the best center? Obviously a really good player. Got the Lady Byng. Obviously a really clean player in 94-95. 95-96, though, the next season was his greatest statistical season of his career. And it's because during that season, for whatever reason, and if you don't know hockey strategy, you don't always put all of your best players on one line. Sometimes they play the same positions. Sometimes they don't complement each other. Sometimes you just want to be able to match up well against the other team and have two lines that can score really well instead of one. But for whatever reason, in 1995-96, the Penguins throw all of that out the window. They take and put three of the NHL's all-time leading scorers together on a line. So this is going to be, before we get into it, his third and final 100-point season. It's going to be his most with 119. It's also the second and final time he's going to lead the league in assists with a career-high 92. He almost broke 100 points just with assists this year. He goes on a line with Mario Lemieux, who I told you was a center. Francis is a center. This year, they're going to play Lemieux on the wing, and on his opposite wing is Jaromir Jagr. Great name to say. To put this in perspective, Francis is second all-time in assists. Lemieux is 11th all-time in goals. Jagr is 4th all-time in goals. If we're looking at total points, Jagr's second, Francis is 5th, and Lemieux is 8th. If you were playing a video game that had the all-time Penguins, like you're playing all-time teams against all-time teams, the first line they put out in 95-96 would be the first line for the all-time Penguins. It
Ridiculous.
is the perfect confluence of this is arguably, so we'll just call it one of the greatest lines ever.
I was gonna say that's gotta be one of the greatest ever.
Yes. To put it more in perspective, Jagr and Lemieux both went over 60 goals that year. Now, this has only happened 40 times in NHL history. It's only been done by 22 players total in NHL history. It has only ever happened in the same season 5 times. And it's only happened by teammates one other time in the history of the NHL, when Wayne Gretzky and Jari Kurri both went over 60 for Edmonton in 1984 and 1985. This happens the second time two teammates got 60 goals in the same season. It was the last 60-goal season for the next 11 years. And since then, it's only happened 3 times total. To continue to put this in perspective, most of those 60-goal seasons, including the other time two teammates did it, happened in the 80s, which happened to be on a per-game basis the 10 highest scoring years in league history. Just a weird thing that happened, an anomaly. Scoring was going crazy then. The year that the Penguins did it was the 35th highest scoring year in league history. So they're doing this in an era where we don't score a lot of goals. They're doing an all-time great thing.
So what you're saying is NHL in the 80s also had an amphetamine problem, because they were all over the place.
Okay, so definitely yes on that.
Wow.
But also that was I think the goal. I don't know that the goal was a little bit bigger, but goalie equipment was still super tiny, and they were just putting the puck where they wanted to. I think that the stick technology had gotten a little bit better, and they were just like,
wow, That's why the
Going,
goalies take up the entire goal today is because of what
yeah.
they were doing to goalies in the 80s.
So some of the goalie equipment now is an answer to that. Then they just started like playing super defensive. Mario Lemieux the first time he retired was part injury, part him being fed up with the way the game was officiated, because he played at the tail end of those wide open, you can't really bother anybody like the NFL today era of hockey, and then it turned into NFL blitz version of hockey where everybody was just beating the crap out of everybody. So that, but they do this, they go on this tear during that era where guys could get away with just about everything, and nothing was going to be called a penalty and all that stuff. He would go on after that season to play 2 more seasons in Pittsburgh. He would win another Lady Byng before becoming a free agent. He would eventually become the captain in Pittsburgh after Mario Lemieux had to retire the first time. He had an article in Sports Illustrated written about him in which a teammate said, quote, "He doesn't make the big headlines. He doesn't get the big contract. He's just a very special player who's quietly become one of the all-time greats." That quote is used in his Hall of Fame write-up, and it's echoed throughout that Hall of Fame write-up about him just not making waves, not being the headline getter, just a solid pro. We're going to pause there because I got one more question for you. It's time for trivia.
Oh,
Everybody's favorite.
Hockey trivia.
Gonna rip you a new one here.
Yeah.
All right, in this 1995-96 season, where the Penguins put all their chips in one all-time great basket, the Penguins did win the Northeast Division. Give them credit. That's the only thing they can be credited with winning. They did not win the President's Trophy. They did not win the Eastern Conference, so they didn't appear in the finals. Therefore, they didn't win the Stanley Cup. 3 things that you might could hang a banner for. So what I'm going to task you with doing inside of 10 questions is naming the President's Trophy winner, the Eastern Conference champion, and the eventual Stanley Cup champion of the 95-96 season.
And none of those are the same teams?
They are none of them the same teams, no.
Oh, God. I was like, surely you'll like toss an underhanded one so that they repeat.
If you get 2 of these, I'll be happy with you. We'll go for 1 and then we'll see how far it goes.
Okay, so let's see. I got to remember everything you just said. So, President's Trophy. So, most points regular season.
Yes.
Eastern Conference representative in the Stanley Cup Finals. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah.
And then, so that means the West won the Stanley Cup that year.
That is true.
Okay. Let's do President's Cup, I guess.
Okay.
What conference were they in?
The President's Trophy winner was in the Western Conference. I will say that this is a team and a city that is always going between West and East, kind of flip-flopping depending on the league and the era of leagues, whether they're in the West or East.
Somewhere in between. So like Midwest or like Texas. Yeah. Texas didn't have any hockey teams, did they?
Texas did have a hockey team by this point, yeah.
Oh, geez. So
if you think about the era, one of the answers, 2 of the answers should be decently easy, given the era of hockey that it was, 95, 96.
Like, who was great at hockey in the 90s?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to stay in the Midwest because I feel like that's the only area that would make sense. Teams in the Midwest. What state are they in? I have nothing.
Come on, not even colors, not a player, just what state?
Oh,
no.
Players.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if I could figure that. Okay, so do you have the top scorer for that team that year?
Yes, I'll give you more than just the top scorer. They had two players among the league leaders, Sergei Fedorov and Steve Yzerman.
That doesn't help at all.
Oh, come on.
That doesn't help at all. Team colors, go. This is
Red and
3,
white.
right?
Yeah, red and white.
Detroit.
Yeah.
Red Wings?
The Red Wings won the President's Trophy with 113. No, sorry, little dyslexia there. 131 points in the regular season.
Gosh, that's incredible.
Very good team. That was part of their dynasty. Now their main rival, give you that one for free without it being one of your hints. Their main rival in the late 90s is one of your answers. So you're still looking for the Eastern Conference champion and the Stanley Cup champion.
They're one of their main rivals.
Mm-hmm.
Big 90s.
The big hockey rivalry of the 90s.
That doesn't help at all either. It wasn't the Whalers. Okay, so would that team also be considered the Midwest if it is a rivalry?
Nah, True West.
True West.
You will find this place's teams in the west of every league, although not in the NBA. They're not in the furthest west division, but in everything else they are.
Okay, so this is okay. So I'm trying to think. I'm doing a terrible job at this, and so what I'm trying to do is relate. Like, I'm just trying to think of team names.
I think the players will help you on this one.
Are you sure?
Yes. Yeah, I think
okay. So. Okay. Who are the players on that? We're talking the one of the two teams that are remaining.
So this team has 3 Hall of Famers that played that season: Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg, and Patrick Waugh.
Nothing.
Patrick Waugh?
Absolutely nothing.
The King?
Nope.
Oh, no. Okay. All right.
Nothing. So if we're this is being recorded at the the Eastern and the Western Conference Finals are being played right now, and that's like the only teams I can think of right now because they're the ones on TV.
Yeah.
Are either of these two teams still playing hockey today?
Yes.
On this date as we are recording.
Right now today.
They are. One of them or two of them?
I'm
asking too many questions.
One of them is still alive. I think we're at 6 now.
In the West. All right. The Avalanche or the Oilers? Edmonton is also West, right? I don't know Canadian geography either.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, Edmonton is way out there. It's like the North Pole almost.
But you said American sports leagues. This team is always in the West. So
I did say
I'm
that.
going.
Edmonton has no other. Yeah.
Yeah. So then other Colorado teams. So one of them is the Avalanche.
The Stanley Cup champion that year is the Avalanche. The Avalanche famously had a back and forth with Detroit throughout the 90s. And Patrick Waugh, all-time great goalie for the Colorado Avalanche. Your hockey fandom is very much...
Could have fooled me. I told you.
I'm exposing both of us right now.
I told you. This is bad. Okay, so then that would be so we're talking who won the Eastern Conference. Who was good in the East? My mind immediately goes to the Northeast. Is this team is not in the Northeast?
Absolutely not. No, yeah. That's 7
Absolutely not.
Absolutely, yeah. Definitely no, not even close.
Not even close, but they're in the East.
Yep.
Players probably won't help me here either. I'm just going to throw that out there.
Certainly not. If Patrick Waugh and Steve Yzerman did not help you, I guarantee you that this team's roster, is going to be a no. There are no Hall of Famers. On this team's roster.
What are the team colors
for this team? Well, kind of hard to describe, really. I'll give you their current official colors are red, blue, navy blue, and white. They've
Blue and navy blue, or just navy blue?
Yeah, all four of those. Red, navy, blue, and white. All are.
Ew. Definitely not Northeast, but in the East. So Florida, Georgia, Atlanta. I don't know if Atlanta had a team. Florida had or has. This was 96, so the Hurricanes weren't here yet.
You could ask for an athlete in a different sport. You could ask for the city. You got two more questions.
An athlete in a different sport. What city are they in?
Miami.
Miami has a hockey team?
Blake.
Had a hockey team? You're joking. Is this a joke? They're called the Miami somethings. This is taking far too long.
They are not called the Miami anythings, no. But they play in Miami.
So it's a Florida team. Was it the Panthers?
Yeah, it's the Florida Panthers play in Miami.
See, I didn't know that. No idea. They could have played in Tallahassee for all I knew. The Key West Panthers.
Hey, look, we can't be. This is what we don't know about sports right here.
This yes. Hockey history is not it.
If I'd have asked you who's second all time on the Whalers Hurricanes points, you might have gotten that easier. But hey, most of the people listening to this, we know from statistically speaking, also are not big hockey fans. So you nailed it. You got it.
God.
Got all three within 10 questions. That's the rules.
All right, well, we got to hurry up. I took far too long.
Right. So those were the champions of the year 95-96 when Ron Francis was doing all-time great things with Mario Lemieux and Jaromir Jagr. At the end of the next season, or two more seasons later, rather, after the 98 season, Ron Francis was 35 years old, which most cases is getting toward the end of the career. We can speculate. A lot of hockey players do play later on into their 30s. Really great ones do. We could also make speculations, given the time period it happens, how he was still playing at a high level at the age of 35. We won't do that here, but possibly.
I might.
The problem with his free agency was twofold. Number one, he's 35 years old. Number two, the Pittsburgh Penguins are in dire financial straits and actually filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy that summer. They have no money to pay him. The NHL was an uncapped league in that time, and to pay for the salaries they were paying, they borrowed money on loan to do so. The loans were deferred, and they all came due all at one time for the Stanley Cup years in 98. They didn't have the money to pay for them. So they filed Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They could not pay for, obviously, you can't add to your expenses while you're filing for bankruptcy. So he has to go elsewhere, and he returns to a familiar face. Now, he was fifth in the NHL in scoring in his age 35 season. He could have gone anywhere, but Carolina, the former Hartford Whalers, who had fallen on hard times as well and had to move to North Carolina because they weren't making money in Hartford as they were. North Carolina, yeah, we would love the Raise Up Petey Pablo song here. But that's how you get delisted on YouTube.
Yeah, we did that once. Let's not do it again.
The Hurricanes had just left Hartford. They played their first year in Greensboro, North Carolina, and had just averaged slightly over 9,000 people per game in attendance. That's bad. That's no good. The team had tried to make a splash the year before in signing Sergei Fedorov, who we just mentioned as being a Hall of Famer on the Detroit Red Wings. But they were unable to do so. And so before the second season, they're looking for a way to move the needle. They grab Ron Francis, who's a franchise icon, albeit not here, and they bring him back into the fold and move the needle. He does, right? This is another time they pull him in to go to Hartford. Things start happening immediately. They send him to Pittsburgh, win the cup immediately. They pull him into Carolina. things start happening immediately. The franchise, by the way, had floundered while he was gone. They lost in the first round the year he was traded and one more year after. So I'll correct myself on something I said earlier. They did make the playoffs one more time after the terrible trade. But then they had missed the playoffs for 6 straight seasons in a league in which, again, over half the teams make the playoffs. Immediately upon his arrival, they, just like in Hartford, they win the division this time instead of just making the playoffs in year one. They do miss the playoffs in year two, but only by a single point. And then in his third year back in 2001, they win a playoff series for the first time since the year of our Lord, 1986. 15 years in between first round victories. Ron Francis was there for the last one, and he was there for the next one in 2001. And in 2002, this is important because his age 35 season was way back in 98. We are talking in 2002, we're talking about his age 38 season. At the age of 38, he had his best year back with the Carolina Hurricanes. He won his third Lady Byng for sportsmanship. He also won the Clancy Memorial for humanitarian work. He did a lot with Special Olympics and associated charities. He finished 6th that year. At the age of 38, he finished 6th in the Hart Trophy voting. That's the MVP of the NHL. That is the highest career finish he ever had at the age of 38 in 2002. He finished that year 4th in assists with 50, 9th in points with 77. He scored 14 goals on the power play, which were good for 6th in the league. Again, can't stress this enough. Age 38 season. The team wins their second division and goes on a run to the Stanley Cup Finals, a finals that, if you look at it, they lost 4-1. Looks like they got stomped, but many observers say they lost a triple overtime game in Game 3 that would have put them up 2-1. They were leading late in the game before it went to overtime. Many people say that if they'd have won that game, they would have won the cup. They did not win that game. They did not win the cup. So Ron Francis, the captain of that team that did that, he re-signed with the Hurricanes after 2002, but the team, following a trend that it would go on and had happened prior, just wasn't very good after that run in 2002. In 2003 and 2004, they weren't awesome. Francis was in his last year in 2004 and was traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs to make one last run at the Cup, which was, as we know from Maple Leaf history of failing, also unsuccessful there. He wasn't done, by the way, with the team after retirement. After he retired, he came back a third time to the franchise, becoming part of management, first as the director of player development under former general manager Jim Rutherford. When he was fired, he was named the general manager, served there from 2011 until 2018, and eventually a spreadsheet monster became owner and fired him again. Not that was unfounded. The team had not really amassed much success while he was the general manager. They missed the playoffs each of those years that he was general manager. But the players that he got through signings and draftings made up the core of a team that eventually made the playoffs 4 years in a row now. After his firing, he spent a year kind of away from the game, and then he was named the general manager of the expansion Seattle Kraken, and he got that team on the ice. They just finished up their first season in 2021-22. He was a first ballot, obviously, Hockey Hall of Famer. He was named to the 100 greatest players in NHL history in 2017. His final numbers, 549 goals, puts him 29th all-time. 1,249 assists, puts him second all-time in assists, only behind Wayne Gretzky. His 1,798 points are 5th all-time, and they came in 1,731 games, which are also fifth all-time, notoriously healthy. He was over a point per game player in a 23-year-long career. What do you think?
We don't talk about it. We don't talk about it enough because I obviously don't talk about it because I don't know anything about hockey, allegedly. But the the hockey talk that I do hear and know, his name is just not mentioned, and it's almost like he's like the silent assassin. Like he just showing up to work, doing his job, going home, and he did it as well as anybody could do it for the most part, for about as long as anyone has ever done it. And I mean, he's got 2 cups to show for it. I honestly thought before we started recording this that he was there when Carolina won the Stanley Cup in 2006. See, that's how much I knew.
Retired, yeah.
But only 3 All-Stars is sad.
So he made update that he made a 4th one, but it might as well have been 3 because that was the year that he was like 3rd in scoring, and the all-time great year. They left him off the All-Star ballot. He wasn't able to be elected. The commissioner had to put him in the game because he wasn't able to be elected. So 4 All-Stars, but it may as well have been 3.
But he should have been 14-time, because he was leading the Whalers, and wasn't it only because he was on the Penguins at the time when those things started happening? But he was like franchise leader for this is like what they're doing to Fred Taylor for the Jacksonville Jaguars, leaving him out of the Hall of Fame. Like he's like done everything for that franchise, franchise leader everywhere in rushing yards and touchdowns and everything. And he's like one of the highest all time in rushing yards, not in the Hall of Fame. Yeah. And he's been retired for over 10 years. And he just quietly showed up, did his job, went home, did it well for a really long time. And because he didn't make a fuss about it, no one else did. That's Ron Francis in a nutshell, it seems.
Very much like it. He didn't run his mouth. He didn't showboat. He didn't go crazy. He didn't grab headlines one way or the other, except a weird trade on the way out. And you don't even see, if you look up worst trades in sports history, that one gets called it, but it's not always on the lists when you do it. So everything, partly because it's hockey, part because of the way he was, it just flew under the radar, and everybody kind of just overlooks Ron Francis.
Not anymore. Not anymore.
Watch. Dang it.
And,
all right.
And before we go, just please forgive me, folks. Hockey people, just continue to inform me about hockey, because it is something I like to pay attention to now. It was not something I was paying attention to when I was 5. So get over it.
Yeah, what he said. If you got any other stories or ideas, get them to us. We'd love to do a show for you. And until next time, that's what you don't know about Ron Francis.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this episode of What You Don't Know About Sports. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please leave us a review, 5 stars only please, and hit that subscribe button wherever you listen. If you have a great sports story, we want to hear about it. You can connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at WYDKAS Podcast, and on our YouTube channel at What You Don't Know About Sports Podcast. All episodes are written, recorded, and edited by us. Stay tuned for the next episode.